Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Lee Carter. He is a delegate in Virginia's House of Delegates and just announced he will be running for governor of Virginia, which the race is in November. I wanted to start, we've spoken before, but you are an open, proud socialist in a state that politically seems to be have moved a little bit over the years to more of this suburban neoliberal kind of thing. What do you think in terms of you, a working class, proud socialist, you drive Lyft on the side to earn money, running in what the Democratic Party has really tried to make its new coalition of kind of upper middle class, professional class liberals?
Yeah, I think when you look at the numbers, you look at the political landscape in the United States generally, there's a tremendous dissatisfaction with both major political parties, right? So, the Republicans' primary argument when they're trying to get votes is we're not the Democrats. And the Democrats' primary argument when they're trying to win votes is we're not the Republicans. And you get a lot of people that have checked out. They've just given up entirely on having anyone actually fight for them. If you look at, for example, the 2016 presidential election, if none of the above was a candidate, none of the above would have won, 43 or 44 different states. So there is this dissatisfaction and it's everywhere. And I think that, Virginia gives us an opportunity. We've got the first major election in the post-Trump era. And it's an opportunity to show that this is a time that's ripe for realignment. And, doing it in Virginia would be tremendously symbolic because, when I go to work in the legislative session, I go into the exact same building where people stood and declared war against the United States. It was the capital of the Confederacy. And so to have that realignment begin in Virginia and say that we're going to put a multiracial working class coalition first and foremost in our politics would send a message to the entire world that we're done playing around with the corporate establishment.
And let's talk about Virginia specifically. I've reported there, other than the infamous blackface of Governor Ralph Northam, as far as I can see, hasn't really been a friend to workers. Has championed right to work in Virginia, which is basically union busting, is, like most of Virginia's politicians, bought off by Dominion Energy as well as other corporations, and has not been so kind to the environment. I'm thinking specifically about the Mountain Valley Pipeline, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. So you also have Terry McAuliffe, who is also the former governor, now running again, kind of a disciple of the Clintons, their BFFs, and a lot of other people running. What do you think in terms of, could this be a strength? So many people running, it might let them fight for the neoliberal end, and you can kind of carve out your own position on the left?
Yeah. When you look at the rest of the field, I was very upfront with Virginia reporters when they would ask, are you going to run? Are you not going to run? And I kept saying over and over and over again, I'm giving the field a chance to put out a vision that is big enough to rise to this moment. And that moment is that we're in sort of cascading crises, right? We've got the failure to deal with the pandemic, which has caused economic collapse. And, hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs and losing their health care in a pandemic. And so, I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for any of the other candidates to put forward a vision, and it just didn't happen. So I decided to step forward and say, you know what, we need a governor who is not going to take money from for-profit corporations or industry interest groups. I'm the only one that can say that, right? We need a governor who's going to oppose these massive what they call economic development deals, where we just give tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to mega corporations like Amazon and Micron. And I'm the only candidate in this race that has a credible claim to saying that I will oppose those, because I always have. And looking forward, how we deal with this crisis. We need a governor who's going to fight first and foremost for the working people of Virginia, who's going to stop those corporate subsidies and use that money to look after the 8.5 million people that call Virginia home. We need to make sure that we're reimbursing people for their out-of-pocket COVID expenses. We need to make sure that, when we legalize cannabis, we use every single penny of that tax revenue for reparations for Black and Indigenous Virginians, right? So on issue after issue after issue, I depart from the bipartisan consensus in a way that puts working Virginians first, and I'm the only one in this race who can say that.
And I want to ask you, because I think a lot of people think of, the Rust Belt and Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin as kind of the rotting corpse of the working class. But my understanding is Virginia has severe inequality economically and a lot of struggling working class people. Can you kind of talk about, as a delegate, what have you seen? Who have you met in terms of people struggling out there?
Yeah, this is the most economically unequal state in the union, right? We've got the wealthiest county in America, Loudoun County, Virginia, which is known as the Beverly Hills of the East Coast. It's a place where you can go and you can see public, pick up polo games. You can run into U.S. senators going out there to ride their horses. But then you go another couple of hours down the road up in the mountains and you've got people that are living in just absolutely horrid conditions because the economy of the western part of our Commonwealth and the southern part of our Commonwealth has been just completely decimated by these bipartisan trade agreements that have shifted the manufacturing economy out of that part of the United States. So, I see people all the time who come from that affluent part who don't understand what the problem is. They say the system is going great for me. Why should I want to change it? And then I also see people who, they're living on $800, $1,000, maybe $2,000 a month. And we can't really call ourselves a just society while we have that dichotomy, right? We've got to make sure that we're looking after people who are struggling. And we've got to rebuild our economy in a way that doesn't just funnel more money over to Jeff Bezos. We've got to get money into the hands of working people so that they can set up their own enterprises that are owned and operated democratically by working Virginians so that new trade agreements can't outsource their jobs again.
Are you trying to tell me that Virginia basically selling its entire soul to have Amazon come over hasn't showered all of Virginia with prosperity?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, it hasn't even showered the area that they're moving into with quote unquote prosperity, right? Because all it's done is it's turbocharged the gentrification of Northern Virginia. I've got a train line that goes basically from a block away from my apartment right up to the Amazon campus. And because of that easy access to the Amazon campus, my rent went up like almost 20% in a month after that announcement. It was before a single person was hired, before a single shovel hit the ground. My rent went up that much. And so, I'm an hour away from it. And so you've got people that are being priced out of their homes because of the expected influx of Amazon workers. And they're still going to be going to the same jobs, right? So where they used to have a 15-minute commute, now they're going to have an hour and 15-minute commute. So it has follow-on effects on the environment because they're using more gas. It has follow-on effects on traffic because they're sitting on the highways for longer. And so, it's one of these things where the big corporate deals that people like Terry McAuliffe love to brag about have real negative consequences on the people. But those negative consequences don't make it into a headline. So they keep doing it and they keep bragging about it.
And people should know, I covered on the ground the fight against Mountain Valley Pipeline there, but Terry McAuliffe as governor made a sweetheart deal before he left to essentially allow the fossil fuel company that owns Mountain Valley Pipeline to cap its liability in the event of contamination. I don't remember the number, but peanuts compared to what they should have been charged. So between him and obviously Governor Northam has made favorable decisions for fossil fuel companies. It hasn't been good for environmentalists there.
No, not at all. Even the biggest quote unquote environmental legislation that we've gotten in recent years, it was put up by another one of my competitors, Senator McClellan. But she admitted to the Richmond Times-Dispatch that she wasn't even a part of the negotiations on it. So, it was essentially written by Dominion Energy to let them, instead of price gouging on fossil fuels, to let them price gouge on turbines and solar panels. And it's not as bad for the environment, but the timeline to getting us to carbon neutral is still 10 years too slow, and the people of Virginia are going to be paying out through the nose for it. It's sort of the worst of all possible worlds when it comes to environmental legislation.
And let me ask you, because right now I would say Medicare for All, which 10 years ago progressives were laughed at about, people who might have not necessarily been for it or had a strong opinion are more open to it now because they've been affected by COVID, or they know people affected by COVID. You'd be in the unique position as a governor rather than a congressperson to try and implement a single payer system in that state. Tell me about what would be your proposal or plan if you were elected for a single payer in Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, the federal government would be the ideal place to do it. Because they have the kind of economies of scale that a state government doesn't. And they're a currency issuing authority, right? So in times of crisis, they can just print more cash to keep it running. But we can't sit around and wait for the feds forever, right? So actually, during my first campaign for the House, I came up with a plan where I said, look, let's look at the closest analog to Virginia on the world scale, which is Austria. Our population is about 8.5 million. Theirs is, 8.6, I think. So, roughly the same. Their GDP is within 10% of ours. Their land mass is roughly the same as ours. And they have a universal healthcare system, right? So even though theirs is the most expensive in Europe, it's still 30% cheaper than what we're paying when you combine public and private expenditures. And we don't cover anywhere close to everybody, right? So I said, there's absolutely no reason why we can't get a state level single payer system here to sort of shame the feds into acting. So I've been fighting to clear the way for that through my entire time in the legislature. I've managed to get a study from the Virginia Department of Health on exactly where all of our healthcare money is coming from, public and private. And I'm working to try to get JLARC to implement a feasibility study for putting in place a single payer healthcare system. But yeah, as governor, I'm going to fight to make sure that Virginia is the first state to guarantee everyone healthcare, period. Not access, not affordability, healthcare. If you need a doctor, you can see a doctor.
And I want to ask you, because Virginia is the dark underbelly of the CIA, the FBI, the entire military industrial complex, the defense contractors, Raytheon, you name it. So you wouldn't only have the usual suspects against you in terms of the banks, fossil fuel companies, big pharma, et cetera, but you have the big boys in defense. How would you, obviously small dollar contributions, all that, but what would you do as governor? Because those entities get a whole lot of sweet subsidies from Virginia.
Well, look, I mean, there's a class divide even within the military that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, right? I'm a veteran. I did 5 years in the Marine Corps, enlisted, right? And it's that enlisted part that sets me apart from all the other veterans that are in Virginia politics, because they're all officers, almost all of them. So, a lot of people don't realize that, for example, officers can quit at any time as long as the government didn't pay for their 4-year university. But enlisted folks are locked into a contract for 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, however long. And if we as enlisted folks try to object to what we're doing, we go to jail. Right. So, there are hundreds of thousands of enlisted sailors, soldiers, Marines, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen here in the Commonwealth of Virginia that know, the most commonly heard phrase on a military base is my recruiter lied to me, right? So, it's about getting in touch with folks, even in those military communities, and saying, look, I know my recruiter lied to me too. They said this would be something good for the world that I could do. And for 5 years, the government just used me to prop up corporate interests. And you touch into that and you really start to get anti-war folks coming out, and folks that are against these corporate influences. And they'll come out and they'll vote and they'll go, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to vote for Carter because, deep down, he's still Corporal Carter, right? The trailer park kid wearing camis.
And lastly, that's a good segue. Tell us a little bit more about you, because you have personally probably have a similar story to a lot of people watching, in terms of doing odd jobs, Lyft driver. Give a sense of what makes you different than Mr. McAuliffe and Governor Northam.
Yeah. Looking at my background, first of all, I'm proud to say that I'm a working class guy, right? I'm an electronics repairman by trade. It's what the Marine Corps had me doing. After I got out, I spent about 4 years fixing cancer therapy equipment. I bounced around a little bit and ended up getting hurt at work. And I ran for office for the first time because the workers' compensation system just was not there for me when I got hurt. And so, it's a very sort of Mr. Smith goes to Washington kind of thing. I decided, if no one is going to fix the workers' comp system, I got to get into a position where I can do that. I had to choose because there's not a lot of hospitals that want their repair guys there for 10 months out of the year instead of 12. I had to choose between actually working and making money or being in politics and trying to help people. And so, I chose trying to help people. And I've been scrimping and saving and trying to make ends meet, driving for Lyft before the pandemic, trying to make up for the low pay as a legislator and stay in this fight and keep fighting to make things better for all 8.5 million Virginians. And that's the biggest thing, on a personal level that sets me apart from the rest of the field, because when you look at the 5 candidates for governor right now on the Democratic side, you've got a multimillionaire, you've got 3 lawyers, and you've got Lee Carter.
I think that's a great bumper sticker, if you could fit it. Well, how could people find out more about your campaign? You just launched. Obviously, the race is later this year. Where can people find out more?
You can go to carterforvirginia.com. That's all spelled out, carterforvirginia.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Carter4VA. So it looks like Carter Forva when you write it down, but at Carter4VA. But this is going to be a campaign that doesn't take a single dime from for-profit corporations or industry interest groups. We're up against the very embodiment of the political establishment. We are running up against people who have gotten single checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars already. But we've got the people, right? We've received more individual contributions in our first 3 days than any of our other competitors have in their first, in some cases, 3 months, right? We've got the people, and we're going to get the word out there through word of mouth, people talking to their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers, and saying, hey, on June 8th, you got to go vote for this guy, Lee Carter. And until then, kick him $20 and sign up to volunteer.
Thanks, Lee. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.